So how do you make more money on Doordash or Uber Eats, Grubhub, Instacart, any of those? It's a good question, but I'm not going to answer that question today. Well, hello, Courier Nation. Welcome to the Deliver on Your Business podcast, where you are the boss. We are all about encouraging you and equipping you to take control of your business as an independent contractor in the gig economy when you're working with apps like Doordash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, Instacart, Uber, Lyft, and all of these other little guys. It's all about helping you to be the boss. Well, hey, my friends. You know, one of the cool things about running a website is there's this thing called Google Search Console, and you can learn all sorts of things about what people are looking for when they come to your website, and I can see all the different things that people have searched for. And something that I'm noticing that a ton of people are searching for is, how do you make more money on Doordash? What's the best way to make more on Uber Eats? How can you get more for your delivery work? Now, at EntreCourier.com, I think I've been really lucky with Google. There's just a lot of people that are finding the website when they're looking for different things about, especially about Doordash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, and some of those, and even surprisingly, sometimes even looking for information about Uber and Lyft and other apps that I don't write about as much. But you know, when it comes to this that question of how do you make more money on Doordash, I don't show up well for searches like that. I just did a search right now. How do you make more on Doordash is what I searched for. And in my search, sometimes depending on where you are, the results are different, but I didn't show up until like the fourth page of results. And the article that showed up, it was an article about Doordash hiding the tips. So it wasn't even an article about that. And part of the reason that I don't show up well when people are looking for that is I've not really written about that particular topic. My focus has always been kind of more on the business side. I'm not going to do all the, I don't tend to do as much of the nuts and bolts. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. There are a lot of resources for that out there. But I tend to focus more on things like, how do you operate as a business? What can you learn from treating it like a business? Because ultimately what I want to do is give you the tools and just kind of that business mentality and attitude that will help you to figure out how to make more. But here's the thing, even though, and like I said, I talk about this website and this podcast are more about the business side of it. The truth is making more money is part of business, right? And so I don't know, maybe at some point, maybe I need to talk about that more specifically. I don't know. But the question is, how do you find out then how to make more? What's the best way to find out how to make more money on any of these platforms? Because I just told you in the intro, I said, I'm not going to answer that question. But what I do want to do is talk about what I think is maybe the best way to make more. But, here's some of the different things that you can do. You can do a Google search, just like what I was talking about. A lot of people are doing that. And I'm going to be honest, I roll my eyes a lot at some of the results that I do find. And that's maybe one of the things that makes me say, maybe I should write a little more about that. And I don't know. You could ask a Facebook group. You could ask on Reddit. And just brace yourself for the toxicity when you do that. That's the thing that I've found on a lot of social media, that you get ridiculed for the questions. You get a lot of really stupid answers. Every once in a while you get a gem in there, but man, I tell you what, I just have a harder and harder time with Facebook groups in general. And so, who knows? I mean, that's a place so that you can get some good information. You could pay for a course. There are some folks that I've seen that offer courses out there. But the thing I'm noticing is that usually I'm seeing courses from people that delivery isn't even their main thing, And so I don't know. I've thought about that. I actually put a course out one time that I just kind of did a trial run, and I may still do it. I'm not sure that if I ever do a course that, whether I would actually charge for it or whatever, I don't know. But, there's some ideas out there. There's a ton of YouTube videos. You ask that question, you'll probably find more stuff on YouTube than you do on the internet, more like blogs or written things like that, because it's like everybody who's ever delivered Doordash that gets themselves on YouTube seems to be up there to tell you how to make more money or something like that. And there is some good stuff out there. There are a few YouTubers that I think really have some good takes out there. And there's a lot of crap out there. There's just, I don't know, you get some that kind of ramble more, and you get some that it seems like it's more about getting clicks, because more clicks means you can make some money on advertising. And then you got, I don't know, there's just some garbage out there. And yet, once again, it's just like all these others. There are some gems. There are some people that just have some great information out there. You can listen to podcasts. But you know what? I'm still, to this day, really surprised at how few podcasts there really are. And in fact, I was just on as a guest with Chad on GigTube on his podcast. And we were talking about that a little bit, that it just seems like there's really not much out there for gig economy podcasts. And so, it's still kind of hard to find some good things. And hopefully you get some good information on here. But again, I just admitted I've not really tried to directly answer that particular question. So, hopefully I give you the tools for it. But, and once again, maybe I should get into that a little bit more. I don't know. But I don't know. I think that there's some better ways to do things. And here's another option. You could have somebody that could coach you. And I'll put a link in the show notes for this. There's Jason Pease, who is, he was a guest on Rideshare Rodeo on episode 76, which is just a little more than a week ago as I record this, that he actually goes around the country and coaches people. And so he's done some work in that area. And, so that's kind of an intriguing way, but I don't, how easy is it to find a coach or something like that? But here's the thing. All of these different ideas that I just talked about, all these different things, they all involve one thing. It's all about learning from somebody who's done it, learning from somebody else's experiences, learning from other people. Now, there's a term out there it's in the business world, it's called best practices. And I think it's that learning from others that is the best way to learn how to make more money. As a Dasher, as an Uber Eats driver, Grubhub driver, Instacart, all these little platforms out there, and even Uber and Lyft. I really think the best way to do it, though, it's not just any one of these things. Maybe it's a combination of all of those things. But I really think maybe the best way to do it might be just from community. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk about today. I've said this a few times. I said that, well, maybe I should consider doing some of this, but there's kind of a reason that I haven't. There's been a reason that I've been hesitant to get into that area. And I think the biggest thing is just this understanding that I know that, the things that work for me are not necessarily the things that are going to work for you. My way of doing things is not necessarily the best way. It is, I believe, the best way for me. It may not be the best way for you. And I'm understanding that people have completely different approaches will be more successful in their own situation because they figured out the best way that works for them. I'm not sure that there is a best way. I think that there are a lot of practices that I've learned from others. I think there's a lot of practices you can learn from others, but there's this point where I just understand I'm not the expert. I'm not the be all end all when it comes to how to do this stuff. And I'm just not that I'm just not that willing to call myself the master of all of this, make myself the guru or something. I like to put together information, and it's not even information that's from me. It's information that I find from other people. I will share my experiences and things like that, but it's really hard for me to say, this is the way that you make more money. But I also know that one of the things that's really helped me is my own background, my own experience in business. And so I figured out, and that's why I've had this approach that I've had with entrecourier.com, my website, or with this podcast. And it has been, I could put together a lot of the things that I have learned from running businesses in the past. And I could put together my own experiences, and I could maybe provide some information that could be helpful to you. But where I felt like I could be the most helpful is providing stuff that helps you build a foundation around that whole business, because it was that foundation that ultimately was what helped me to do well. And so the fact of the matter is that when we sign up as independent contractors, we sign up to do this service for these companies as a business. And so my approach has been, let's figure out how to do business first. And once you kind of figure that part out, you can apply a lot of that to make yourself a little more successful. So, there's a part where I kind of feel like, okay, as a whole, what I'm trying to do is to give you the stuff, give you the tools, give you the information where you can become the one to become successful. Sometimes it just needs to be a little bit more than just that information. Now, a lot of the way that I've done this, it really was inspired, I think, from back in my days when I was in telecom. And in particular, a certain experience or group of experiences that I think really helped me develop an attitude. And so I want to kind of share a little bit about that experience with you. It was an experience that encouraged me to develop a business attitude, and that was a great thing. But I think I also realized that, just the business attitude itself wasn't just enough. And I also think that as I think about that experience, there is a greater need for some more practical stuff. But two, I think there's a better way to do it than just me sitting here, trying to be that, guru up on the mountain, trying to tell you how to do it all. And so, I'll tell you, I guess, a little bit about this experience. Now, back in my day, I'm trying to make I'm sounding old, aren't I, by saying that? And okay, I am old, but anyway, that's beside the point. Back in the day, my dad, my brothers, and I had started a telecom company. And this little company that we sold telephone systems to small business. We would sell and install the phone systems, do the service on them, and then we'd sell some services like long distance. Back in that day, that was still a thing. Today, it actually still is. A lot of people don't realize that, but usually it's kind of bundled into things. And I'm going down a rabbit hole, and I'm not going to do that. But we were what I would call the E-Myth poster children. The E-Myth was a book, and the term stood for entrepreneur myth. And the idea of this book is most people that call themselves entrepreneur, it's a myth. And they just think that they are because they're starting a business, right? But they're not really running a business. Essentially what kind of the premise is that most people that when they've started a business, all they have done is they've just created another job where now they're the employee of that job. They haven't really started a business. And in the book, we were what the book would call the technicians. We were people that were great at doing telecom. We were great at service. We were great at putting things together for people, but we had no clue to how to actually be a business doing it. All we were doing was we were selling and installing and servicing telephone systems and things like that, but we had no clue how to actually operate as a business. And I saw it in myself a lot. I took care of a lot of the sales, and I look back and I think, man, I was clueless about that. So here's how bad I was at this. I had this idea that the best way to sell a phone system, this is, the telephones and the business telephones and, the voicemail and some of the automated things that go with it. And I kind of had this idea that the best way to do this was that during the presentation, I'd pull out one of the phones to show them, but then I'd put the phone on the floor and I'd get up and stand on it. Because my idea was it was all about showing how durable these phones are. And who stands on phones? It's kind of like, how many times did that go through somebody's minds when I did that? That it's like, yeah, but who's ever going to stand on these phones, right? So it was those things like that it was just like, I'm amazed that we actually made it as a business, because there were some things we were great at and there were so many things we were clueless about. Now, at the time, we sold one particular manufacturer's product. We sold phone systems made by Panasonic, Panasonic DBS, Panasonic Digital Business Systems. And I to this day believe that for small, medium business, at that time was the best thing that was out there. So, maybe part of why we were able to do something, we were true believers. But, every once in a while, Panasonic would have these regional dealer meetings or something where they talked about new products. They talked about things that were coming out, and they'd talk about, what's coming up for them, just kind of, get everybody together and just, keep us informed. And so the great thing about those meetings was you had a chance to get to know some of the other Panasonic dealers in our region. And I can remember one of the meetings, one of our favorite guys that we talked with a lot of times when we get together, we got to be pretty good friends and stuff. And he had just joined this dealer trade group. So I was a little bit intrigued. And so I found out about it. I, kind of asked him a little bit, kind of picked his mind, said, well, what do you like about it and everything? And so I thought, I want to look into this a little bit. And I talked to somebody that was part of that group then that he was kind of like their sales rep or whatever. And his name was Rick. And Rick was a great guy, but, and he was good at what he did. But he invited me out. He said, hey, we're having a training. They have, part of what they did was a lot of different training programs. So I said, we're having a sales training. It's members only, but I'd love to have you come out if you can come out to Pittsburgh and see this. And I thought, I want to check into this. Now, as a company, we didn't have the budget at the time. We didn't have this it wasn't like, okay, now we can throw several $100s out at going out to visit something like this that, no one was really sure you wanted to pay for, because it was kind of expensive to be part of this group. But I don't know. I felt like there was something I knew that there was something we were missing as a company. And I thought maybe this was something that could help us out. So I was able to just kind of get a couple days off, and I had some airline miles of my own available. And so I jumped out on a plane, and I ended up staying like at a Motel 6 that was within walking distance. Now, back then I was young enough that walking distance is a lot further than what I think walking distance is today. But, I'm staying at a Motel 6, and they're having this meeting at a Marriott. But did it on the cheap. And it was, to me, I think one of the most life-changing things that I had ever done, because what it did was it helped me. It was the beginning of my developing, I guess, kind of a business attitude and thinking in terms of running a business rather than just doing whatever it is that you do in a business. And I think that, we ended up joining that group. Our company became members of this group, and there's a lot from that experience that has shaped a lot of things for me. Just going down the line, it made a difference in my career later on. It made a difference. And I think it makes a huge difference even in kind of how I do things now. There were some things that I learned way back then that really the inspiration between me starting this website and my approach to this podcast and things like that. But here's the thing was with this group was that, it was a trade group for other dealers. But a lot of times, you think of trade groups and you think about, okay, they're trying to lobby the government or something about how to do things for your organization or your industry, or, marketing for the industry or different things like that. You look at, what is it? The Beef Association that runs all the ads. Beef, it's what's for dinner. This wasn't that at all. This was a group that allowed business owners within the industry to share ideas and information among one another. This was a way, it was a community, but it was this professional organization that helped us learn from one another. And especially they focused on, what I mentioned before was best practices. We focused on what's the best way to do things, what's the best way to handle certain things. But more than anything, what is the best way to work on our business rather than just in our business? What's the best way to actually build a business as opposed to playing business, And it really was. It was such a different approach and mindset for us. And it really drives a lot of the way I look at things today. That the thing about it was kind of cool because you could have, a company in San Diego that had a real solid approach to how they sold their systems and how they approached their customers. And you could learn from that, and then this company in Illinois was great at recurring revenue and, in some of their different programs that they could do where it was a regular pay coming in as opposed to just making your money whenever you sold a phone system. And then, we could learn from this company over in Maryland that was just fantastic at, not only tracking how much money they made based on each of their technicians out there, but also about how they could become even more efficient with the time that they're paying for. There were just so many things that you could learn from. And we would get together once or twice a year. But the biggest part of it all was we developed these relationships with dealers around the country. We weren't competing with one another. So, here we are, this little company in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we're trying to find out, hey, how do you compete against this particular company, and you could actually talk to the Toshiba dealer in another community and just find out some things about how their systems worked and stuff like that. And so it was just, there were a lot of things where we could learn from one another, but the biggest one was we learned these best practices. And it was actually through the trainings and through the things as being part of this group that I got introduced to the E-Myth book. And that's the one that talked about, working on your business, not in your business. And you learn how important it was to develop the business side of what you're doing. And we had trainings for financial stuff. We had trainings for service, but it wasn't about how to do the service itself. It was about how to structure your service department and how to set things up so that you could be the most responsive for your customers, and, more about efficiency than other things like that. It was huge for me because, in sales, I talked about standing on the phone, but I could learn why that wasn't such a great technique because, I had a reason for doing that, because back in those days, a lot of phone systems were really crappy and the equipment was fragile. It was like you drop your phone one time and you're out $200 because you got to replace that phone. And so I knew that was a problem. I knew that durability actually was an issue. That I knew that people weren't going to be standing on the phones, but I knew that durability wasn't an issue. But what I didn't understand was that, but our customers could care less about that. They weren't thinking about that. I think, somehow we managed to pull it off, and sometimes it made a difference when I did that. But it was more like a luck of the draw because I'm selling to somebody who just happened to have had to pay for a lot of replaced phones and stuff like that. So a phone system was really kind of an expensive ongoing thing back in those days. So to me, it made sense to do that. But what I didn't know to do was to look through the eyes of the customer. And that was something that I learned, that it was what was more important wasn't what I thought was important. It wasn't the things that I thought the customer should be thinking about. What I had to pay attention to was what was the customer wanting? What did the customer need? Why is the customer getting ready to spend $10,000 for a phone system for a 10 to 12 person office? Why would they even be willing to spend that much money? It seems kind of ridiculous, right? But once I could understand what it is they were looking for, then I could kind of approach things to help answer those questions. And so it was just that kind of thing that when you started learning from other people, and, that's something that it probably should have been common sense to understand that when you're doing sales, right? But that wasn't me. I didn't understand that stuff. But it was huge to be part of this group because you could start talking to other people and they'd say, yeah, this is why I do this. This is why I approach it this way. And so you started to learn how to run a business, and we started to learn how to think and look at things through the eyes of the customer rather than through our own eyes. And it was just, in my mind, one of the most important decisions we could have made was to be part of this, because then we could learn how to be a business rather than just go out there and do it. But here was the crazy thing about this trade group that we were part of. We never talked about phones, We never talked about how to do service as far as the service itself. We never talked about, the features in the phone systems or things like that. Because the idea was everybody was out there with their own stuff that, I think there was kind of this understanding that, okay, you understand the stuff that you're selling. We understand the stuff we're selling. And what these guys in San Diego were selling wasn't necessarily the same thing we were selling in Lincoln, Nebraska. Different things worked for different people. But what we learned was how to run a business so that, we learned this foundation that we could build our business on. And here was the thing was, we really didn't talk about how to make more money. We talked about how to build a business. And once we learned how to build that business, we were in a better position to make more money. And, I think there was just something so influential about being part of that and about the lessons that I learned from a lot of different people in there that, to me was more valuable than, going to school, going to college or something like that. maybe some of that education would have helped. I didn't, it wasn't like I had an MBA or anything like that, but I could learn from other people and see what was working in other places and then apply it to what we were doing. And that was just so huge. And I think it was that lesson in there that really influenced a lot of the approach that I've taken with Entre Courier and with this podcast, because I've focused, I really feel like the most important thing that I can give you is that, some of that business understanding, some of that business approach, the business attitude. And my first 31 episodes of this podcast, I called the MBA, Courier MBA, Master Your Business Attitude, because I really felt like I could give you more by giving you that. And that gives you kind of a foundation, that gives you some of the tools, that gives you some of the attitude that then you could find ways to grow. But there's a piece where sometimes I think, is that enough? And just, as I started this whole thing out, how many times I say, maybe I should put something up there. Maybe I should talk a little bit more about how. Maybe I should get more into the practical. But I think there's a point because of this experience too, that I wonder, is that the best way to do it? Maybe there's a better way to do it. And I look at this group that we were part of and I think, why couldn't we do that here? Why couldn't we do that in delivery? And I know there's a lot of difference probably between these people, operating telecommunication companies and gig economy delivery contractors, right? But here's the thing, again, the point that I always try and drive home, you're running a business. You may not think you are, you may not feel like you are, but you are running a business. And I think that there are so many things about business that really apply. And I really believe that maybe having a sense of community like this could do something for us also. And I think maybe the better answer is, instead of me trying to be the guru to provide all the answers, is what about if we could develop a better sense of community where we can provide the answers for one another, that we can find the things. Because the thing is, I could tell you, I feel like I've done very well with delivery, but I've done really well in Denver, Colorado, which is where I'm located right now. But what about the areas where, there are some places where I'm pretty sure the customers don't tip nearly as well or as often as they do here in Denver. Denver seems to be one of the better places for tipping. So of course it's a little easier to do well in a place like this. So how would I do in some of those places? What about in smaller communities where you don't have as many options? I could talk about delivering downtown Denver, but I can tell you that I've been downtown Chicago, and that's a totally different kind of place. It's not nearly as easy to try and drive around and park and do stuff there. So you got to have a different approach to be successful there. Or, Midtown Manhattan, so there are markets that are much bigger and there are markets that are much smaller. And I can't tell you how to do things in those markets because I've not done those markets. But there are other people that have, And so is it better for me to try and tell you how to do things, or is it better to build a community where we can all learn from one another? And some of the things that I've learned and been able to do well, you can learn from, but somebody else is maybe in a more similar situation and they might be able to help you a little bit more. But I think that this type of thing is kind of what's missing right now in what I'm doing here. And it's that, providing maybe a little bit more practical help. But I feel like the next great thing that we could do is not so much me try and tell you how to do a lot of these things, but instead, could we just kind of build a community where we can all learn from one another how to do stuff? We can all learn from one another's experiences and ideas and different things like that. Can we provide an opportunity that just lets us get together, share our ideas, our thoughts, our successes, our wins, our encouragements? So that's what I want to explore that idea. And so, and it's something that I want to hear from you. This is something that I've said this a number of times I want to hear from, but this is one I really, really, really want to hear from you about, because what do you think? What would you look for if you were to find something like that, And, there were a lot of times that I've come close to starting a Facebook group. And at first it was like, oh, no way. Oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. Because I've just seen how toxic so many of those groups have gotten. And I don't want to go there. I don't want to open up something like that to become what all these other Facebook groups that I've seen for delivery drivers have become. It's just a nasty place, and a lot of things like that. It's like you can't ask a question without being slammed by people left and right. But that said, I've been in some Facebook groups that have been really awesome. I used to think maybe it was impossible to do, but I've been in a couple of groups related to, things about operating my website that have nothing to do with delivery, but it's more about, internet publishing and different stuff like that. And oh my gosh, it's night and day, the difference. These are groups that usually related to something that's is kind of a very hyper-focused group. And I suppose part of it is they're very clear that this is only about this stuff. And typically people in those groups that I'm in, they tend to be very positive. They stay on point. And I love those groups for that reason. There's not that toxicity. So I don't know, maybe it's possible to do something if you do it right on Facebook, but I don't know, there are pieces where part of it is I'm concerned about, moderating. I put more and more time into content these days. And so if I'm going to have to start trying to moderate a group or, moderate the moderators or whatever, all of a sudden that may not leave a whole lot of time for doing deliveries. So I don't know about that. And the other part of it is with so many of these groups that it's like, I don't know how many times when I've gone into the group itself and I've scrolled through it, that it's like, oh man, I missed this one. For some reason, Facebook didn't pop this up into my feed. And it was something that was really helpful. And, how many times though, do you actually go into an actual group to scroll through it or something? And so, the other thing with doing stuff on certain social media platforms is it seems like there's more distractions. One, Facebook only wants to give you what they want to give you. And two, there's so many other things popping up too. And so I'm not sure about that. But at the same time, I don't know, if I go to something else, how many people are willing to go to something that isn't Facebook? So I don't know. I'm thinking about options. I'm thinking about ideas. I'm thinking about whether or not it's actually feasible for my time and everything to go ahead and do this thing. But, it's just, that's what I want to talk about today is just kind of some of these thoughts. It's like, how can we build a community? How can we do something where we can share more information, that it's not just me trying to be the guy up on the mountain, with the big long beard, arms folded or something like that, and telling you how to do delivery. I don't want to be that guy, and I'm not that guy, but I do think that we can learn from each other. And so I'm trying to figure out some different ideas for that. And this is where I'd love to hear from you. I want to build a place that is positive, that, for one thing, and if I have anything to say about how we're going to do it, for one thing, it is not a place to be bashing Doordash, Grubhub, Uber Eats. We can talk about the issues related to them, but it's not just something to complain about these companies as much as it is, okay, this is the issue. How do we overcome these issues? I don't want it to be a place to bash the customers that order from these places. That the idea of it is I want to build something where we can get together and say, how can we be successful in spite of the fact that DoorDash just dropped the minimum pay, or in spite of the fact that customers aren't tipping that often, or different things like that. I want to say, I want it to be a place where, people aren't at each other's throats. I want it to be a place where put downs and bullying are not tolerated, not just by me, but by the group. I want it to be a place that is about addressing the ideas and not making judgments about the people that have the ideas. And maybe that can be a place where we can get together and, we can have live get-togethers. I'd love to have a place where we could just do some more direct Q&A sessions. The thing about a podcast and the thing about blog posts is it's all one-way communication. Where can we get something where there's more give and take, where there's Q&A sessions? Could we do live webinars? How many times would it be helpful just to get together where we can get an actual tax professional on with us as a group and people can ask questions? And, how can we do webinars on, just the business side of things? Or how can you do webinars on, what's going on in the industry or different things like that? All sorts of stuff like that. Somewhere where we could learn from one another. Could we do something like a book club? I'm part of a group that, or part of a membership community where they've got a book club. And so each month they go through a certain book that helps people through, and generally they're books about business or something like that. But, we could talk about books and, find things that would actually help us build as business people. The books that have ideas that we can apply to what we do. And we can kind of work through those, and that provides some accountability. Can we have an accountability section where we talk about our goals and then we celebrate when we reach those goals? And if we didn't reach those goals, how can we, does it help to talk with one another about, okay, what could we have done that would help us with that? I thought about, okay, maybe I could do something where I could provide some exclusive content. But the funny thing is, I've heard from other content creators that have built membership communities, and you always hear about like Patreon groups for certain content creators that, okay, you get this extra exclusive content. And what they find is sometimes they'll get a little bit of extra, people joining for that. But ultimately, when it's all said and done, people are finding out that exclusive content really didn't mean as much. And maybe it would, I don't know. But I think a lot of times, the thing that I've got to understand myself as a content creator, as a blogger, as a podcaster is, and this is one of the lessons that I've learned from back in this telecom group that I was a part of, that is, as a business person, it's not about me. It's about everybody else. And so, is exclusive content going to help you more, or is it more shared ideas from the community? Is that going to help you more? Can we set up sections in the group where, instead of just one long running feed or something like you see in a Facebook group, where we could have maybe it's more like forums. We have a section where we can talk about things specific to Doordash and things specific to Uber Eats, and a section that talks about some of the up and coming or the smaller platforms, and something that talks about tax questions, and another section that talks about, other business things. And maybe something like that could be a little more helpful, because then you can kind of pick and choose the things that really matter to you. And, can we create a group where you develop, I think the term a lot of places will use is masterminds, but the idea is where you could develop a smaller group that just talks about, okay, what works for you. And so you kind of have your little private group within the group, all sorts of different things that you could do with this. But ultimately what I've got in mind, and I'd love to see happen, is, can we build something where it's almost more like a professional association? It is where we can learn best practices from one another. We can learn the things that work well from each other. We can learn the problems to avoid from one another. And ultimately, because we're learning from one another, we're able to make more. And I really do think that community is probably the best way to learn how to make more from a delivery business, from our delivery business in the gig economy. And what can we learn then about where we can go next from this? It's all that kind of stuff that I just think, I don't know, I see maybe a possible value in it. But the question is, what do you think? What would you love to see in a community? Do you think a community like that would appeal to you? I would love to hear from you. I'm willing to put it together. I'm willing to kind of get it all set up and everything like that. I want to provide a place, but I want to find the kind of thing that says, yeah, I want that. And I want to know, what is it that makes that type of thing appealing to you? Or does it even seem appealing to you? I don't know. And you know what? If it helps enough people, then it's worth doing. But, I'm going to put a poll up, and it'll be a place where you can leave ideas, you can leave thoughts, and you can visit the show page that's linked in the show notes for this episode, for season 2, episode 7. And you can leave your thoughts in the comments, or you could email me, email podcast@entrecourier.com. Send me a tweet on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, go follow me on Twitter @EntreCourier, and send a tweet and make sure to tag me. And it's just Entre Courier on Twitter. Or, and I'll put a page too also at entrecourier.com/nation. We'll just call it that. EntreCourier.com/nation. Any of those places. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you would love to see. Any ideas that you've got, any feedback you've got. If you think it's a stupid idea, let me know that as well, because I'd love to get your ideas on that. What would you think about being part of an independent delivery professionals group? Here's the thing I know that you've got a lot to offer. I know that there are people that can learn from you. Your experience means something. Your ideas mean something. The things that you do well mean something to somebody else. And the things that you struggle at mean something to somebody else, because they can learn from those struggles as well as you can, And I also know that there are people out there that can help you with your particular situation better than I can, because they're in situations that more closely relate to what you're doing. And so that's the idea, is can we bring everybody together so that you can find those people that can help you out, that you can find those people that you can help out. And ultimately, the idea is, let's make this, I don't want it to be so much about me. Make it more about you. Make it more about what's going to help you and where can we find it. And if I'm able to provide that information, awesome. And if somebody else is able to provide that information, well, we've got that as because we're all part of a community. That's kind of where I'm trying to get to. And it's like right now, it's just, okay, this is what I'm thinking of. I'd love to get your thoughts. I'd love to get your feedback. I'm begging you for your thoughts and your feedback about this one, because I really think that this could be, the next best thing that we could do to help one another out. And so let me know what you think. Ultimately, what I would love to see is just finding ways to equip and encourage you to take control and to be the boss.